I don't know if I'm audible because I'm using a different camera today. It's actually a phone camera. So I have a feeling that the video is either gonna come out flipped or it's gonna be very dark for some reason. Maybe I'll turn on the light. Wait. Is this better? But now it's very yellow, right? I'm just gonna leave the light on and hopefully everything will be okay. When I was cleaning up my room a little bit, I found some false eyelashes. It feels like I'm wearing wings on my eyes. I don't think I can do this every day. It feels a bit like heavy at the same time. Like even just putting it on for 5 minutes feels like there's additional weight on my eyelids. Or maybe, you know, it just takes getting used to. This month, I managed to read 10 books to my surprise. I guess like it helps that I was very stressed, and it also helps that I was unwell. I couldn't even sit up to game or anything. I'll just try to do this then. I don't know whether or not I'll be able to keep this video below 30 minutes. So the first book that I read is Disorientation by Elaine Chou. So this book has been making its rounds online because this is like the hot book of the month. Everybody wants to read this book. There was quite a wait on Libby. Thankfully, I got like a skip the line copy. It's actually satirizing both academia, the master's program, the PhD program, as well as the way in which white people capitalize on Asian narratives and on becoming the experts of Asian countries, which obviously brings them a lot of, you know, cultural and monetary benefits, all the while keeping those benefits from the actual Asian people whose cultures they are kind of fetishizing. Some of the characters represent white men who kind of have a thing only for Asian women, so they only want to date like either Japanese, Chinese or Korean girls. It's called yellow fever, right? It's called yellow fever. Actually in Singapore also have. We talk about it amongst our friends. I've also had people at work talk to me about it, but I don't feel like we talk about it in the public sphere. Probably because even though Singapore is already considered post-colonial, in many ways we are still kind of having a colonial hangover. We're really hung up over whether or not we are matching up to white people's standards, and white men also kind of still have some base level of desirability by virtue of them being white. I mean, like back home, you know, probably they are not desirable, but over here, just because they are white, they are already more desirable than the native men. This is a prickly issue. I don't really want to step on anybody's toes. Thankfully, my friends are also very like interested in talking about it. So reading this book together has been kind of like a cute little book club. And in a way, I feel like this book does articulate many of the observations that we ourselves have made in our lives, especially after reaching adulthood and especially after going through university. I mean, if you look at the Japanese studies faculty in NUS, you can say, yeah, definitely the people there are definitely qualified, they are definitely working very hard, they are definitely whatever. But it does not change the fact that they are considered subject matter experts of a racial or cultural group that they do not have claim to. And in their search for like kind of a niche, they are capitalizing on the other, even if they do try to elevate it. Next book, codename Verity. And this book has such a long wait time on Libby. I waited so long for it, and I could understand why people say they wish they could read this book for the first time again, because it's incredible. Like, I personally do not like war stories. When I read war novels, I get a bit bored, but this was not a usual war novel. The first half of the book is about a girl unnamed. She doesn't give herself a name exactly. She's sort of writing a confession, and we get the sense that she's being sort of tortured by German soldiers while they are occupying France. So the confession kind of ends when she's about to be sent to her death. Throughout the entire confession, she talks a lot about her best friend Maddie, and the second half of the novel is Maddie's diary entries, and it kind of reveals that part of her confession was actually just completely made up. The story continues from her best friend's perspective. At the end of the day, this is not a war novel. This is a story about two girls who sort of met each other during wartime, and they became best friends with each other, and their friendship endures. I did cry a little bit at the end of the novel. I'm trying very hard not to spoil it, because I feel like this really is the kind of book you can experience as intended only one time. Next, Unnatural Ends by Christopher Huang. This book was actually an advanced reading copy from Nat Galley. I've been like rejected from so many ARC requests that I was very surprised I got it. It said that it was historical fiction and also mystery. In a way it is. It pays homage, I feel, to the Agatha Christie novels. The setting in itself does sort of harken back to a kind of olden English countryside. This story, without spoiling too much for you, is about 3 orphans who were adopted by this sort of like rich dude. And this rich dude, he raised them in his house, but he was really draconian about it. One day he dies, but then when they return home for the funeral, they are told by their stepmother, who is childless by the way, that he was murdered. And then there is like a will that comes out of the blue, and it's just like saying, oh, the person who can solve my murder is the one who will inherit everything. So the 3 siblings are kind of expected to pit themselves against each other. They are kind of expected to fight for inheritance, as we call it in Chinese, 争财产, but they don't follow that. Instead, they start to work through their childhood trauma. They start to sort of mend their relationships with each other, and then they end up solving the mystery together. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I can say that you see it coming a mile away. I thought that the title was especially witty because this book at the end of the day is also about eugenics. He dies via unnatural ends, but at the same time, he was trying to reach an end through unnatural means, which is eugenics. Book 4, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This book is another extremely popular book that I had to wait super duper long on Libby for. It's about, how to say it's about domestic abuse. So the protagonist grew up in an abusive household where she saw her father mistreat her mother, and when she grew up, she kind of still hasn't really come to terms with it yet. She doesn't really understand why her mother did not just leave, or why her mother did not just fight back or something like that. She meets a guy who is the perfect guy. Honestly, like the first 60% of the book, I was like, why am I reading this? Why is this book so popular? I don't get it. Isn't it just another like normal general fiction romance novel where she meets the guy of her dreams, and then he's rich, he's hot, he's very good at sex, and then he buys her an expensive apartment, and then they elope. Like, it just seems like I'm reading some kind of standard romance novel. Like, what am I reading here for? All they do is have sex. So what am I reading for? Until one day he hits her. Not exactly hits her, he pushes her against a kitchen cupboard, and then her head hits the handle, and then she passes out. And obviously she rationalizes it away because she's saying, oh, he just did it by accident, he would never do it again, until he loses his temper again and he does it again, and eventually she just packs up and leave because she needs to break out of the cycle, right? And then she finds out she's pregnant. Does she forgive him and try to have an intact family, or does she sort of do what her mother could not do, which was to leave? At the end, she chooses to leave, and I felt that the afterword was the most important part of the book, because the author actually wrote about how this was semi-autobiographical. She really did grow up in a kind of abusive household, and thankfully her mother made the choice to leave, which was the only thing that allowed her to have a relationship with her father that wasn't fraught with fear and trauma. Just like her previous book, you don't really see it coming until it's here. So I do kind of enjoy, you know, the process of getting tricked by the author, and I totally get it now. I get why it's such a hit. Next book, book 5, Beneath the Rug. This book is a collection of 30 essays, short essays written by people from the social work industry in Singapore. So these are people like psychologists, actual social workers, those working with youths, those working with adults, those working with families. There are also the directors and the founders of non-profit organizations. What I enjoyed was reading between the lines. Like, a lot of them, they like to mention red tape, right? Or they sort of hint to you that the job is not easy, not because of the people, but because of the system itself. The system meaning the employers lah. I mean, if you are a governmental social worker and the government itself is what's making your job difficult, then how are you supposed to do your job properly? And then they end up sort of internalizing a lot of that blame because they are made to feel like they are not good enough and they are not serving the people well enough, when actually I think on some level a lot of them do seem to convey the sense that they know it is not them. They are already doing the best best that they can within parameters not set by them. So I felt that as an educational text, there was a lot of potential in this book. When we talk about systemic inequality, or when we talk about how the system itself is not conducive for social work, what are we exactly talking about? It's very easy to just say, oh, it's the system, oh, it's the government, we cannot do anything. But reading these essays made me feel like actually there is something we can do. It's just that we don't have the numbers. It's like trying to row a boat, but there is a hole at the bottom of the boat, and then you need to scoop the water out of the boat as you are rowing the boat. So how are you supposed to get anywhere when half of your time is spent plugging the holes? Interesting read, kind of thought-provoking. Book 6, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. So this book is written a few decades ago, but the setting itself is set in like 2024, so like 2 years from now, and it kind of predicted an apocalyptic hellscape. Even though it's not so extreme in some parts of the world, it did get quite a lot of things right. For example, the author envisioned that inflation was going to get really bad. Inflation really has gotten very bad. Not just that, but housing is an issue, homelessness is an issue, violence on the streets is still an issue, crime is an issue, climate change is an issue. Over there, it's so hot and human beings have fucked up the atmosphere so badly that in some parts of the world, it only rains once every few years. They are not far off space travel. So there is some discussion of how rich people, instead of trying to use their money to sort of solve the problems they have on Earth, they, and also the government, they pump a lot of money into their space program, trying to send rockets to Mars, to wherever. And needless to say, it doesn't really work, and people die, and then they've just wasted a lot of money and also human lives. But this seems to be like the thing that they think will save humanity, but in reality they are just trying to save themselves. They are just trying to save fellow rich people by, you know, leaving the poor to die on Earth while they go and start a new frontier or whatever. In a way, like I couldn't really believe that she really got everything right. I mean, not exactly, but at the same time exactly. So reading it is a little bit spooky, cause I was like, oh wow, someone actually saw it coming. Imagine if we took her seriously, you know, imagine if somebody went, hey, you know, sci-fi author kind of has a point here, let's do something about it before it becomes like that. Our protagonist is displaced from her starting place, and then she has no choice but to go around, and then as she's going around meeting the different groups of people, you realize, oh my god, everything is fucked up. There are many books that are like that. On Such a Fool Sea by Chang Rui Lee. Yeah. So it's very similar to a book like that, like this book over here. Sometimes I feel like I should just go and compile the books that have the same kind of story or theme and then put them in like one folder for people who would like to do some comparative reading. Okay, next book, possibly the best book that I've read all month, Sistersong by Holland. This is a clear-cut 5 out of 5 novel. This book is really good. It's set in like ancient Britain. So the place doesn't actually exist, but it's set in a part of Britain where Christianity has not touched it yet. So they have their own religion. Their own religion is nature-based. So I guess you can call it paganistic if you're the kind of person who calls everything that's not Christian pagan or occult. But this is their own legitimate religion lah, right? And it's really legitimate in the sense that the book makes it real. Their connection to the land does give them magical power. However, the king, he kind of married somebody from Rome. So the queen herself brought her religion, which is Christianity, over to this country. She brought in this priest called Gildas, and the priest is very, I don't know, like even in Singapore, we have met people like that, you know, people who are saying, oh, only Christianity is legit, and if you don't believe in it, then you are going to hell, and then you must celebrate all our events because our religion takes precedence over yours. I get it, you know, I grew up in a church, but that aspect has never sat well with me, and seeing it reflected in a character set in ancient Britain makes me feel like maybe, you know, fundamentalists are crazy all over the world. Interesting, huh? The king has 3 children, and these 3 children actually are connected quite closely to the land, even though their father has renounced his connection. And what I liked best about this book was that there was a character who turns out to be trans. He always rejected dresses, he always wore trousers, he never felt at ease, he doesn't like it when other people can see him change clothes. But then, because of the priest and also his own mother's sort of religious beliefs, he was having a very difficult time coming out or transitioning even, until he realizes that his connection to magic is what enables him to transition. And you get to see him sort of fight for his right to rule and also sort of fight to earn the respect and the admiration of other people. He even kind of gets a girlfriend. I think it's very cute. Yeah. And his two sisters, who are meant to represent the characters in that traditional murder ballad called The Two Sisters, about they are fighting over a man, and then one of the sister murders her sister, the other sister, and then the body is sort of turned into a harp, which is like, what? It's kind of gross. If I die, don't turn me into anything. Yeah, someone turns the sister into a harp, and then the harp starts to sing and reveal that she was murdered by her. So that's actually like the basis that this is built on. However, the author really fleshes it out completely, and this novel is a very, very clear-cut 5 out of 5 because the writing is just excellent, the planning, the pacing, the everything. It's just perfect. I have no notes, no comments whatsoever. It's just very good. And the treatment of the trans character is really just good. It's just great. Like, it's not something I would have expected. I was just so wowed by this book. I recommended it to everybody. I think everybody should read this book. It shows, you know, that just because you're trying to use a sort of traditional or old genre doesn't mean that you can't treat certain issues in a modern way, if you get my drift. Next book, I have the physical copy, but my room is very messy. So it disappeared. Like, I thought it was on that shelf, but it wasn't there. So it's okay. It's alright. I have a picture of it. So this book, it's a ARC from Ethel's Books. It has 2 plays in it. The first play is called Hawa and the second play is called Potong. What I liked about both of them is that the translations are provided for you, and then the author does not try to make everything English in order to make it comprehensible to the Chinese reader or the international reader or what. It's like, no, he decided to stick with the Malay language, and if you want to find out what is being said, then you read the translation lor. I like that a lot. I think that is how it should be done. A lot of things are lost in translation when you try to fit it, and then when you want to translate things, suddenly you need to think about how to preserve the tone, which then you might end up like modifying the character along the way. I mean, literally, the dialogue is the singular most important thing in a play. Both plays talk about loss and death, and also what does it mean to be different within a very religious framework. So the first play is about this new convert who converted only because her lover was a hijabi. So this was her girlfriend's religion, and her girlfriend was sort of kicked out of her home, and they've been living together, but then her girlfriend had a terminal illness and she died. She's having a very difficult time, and then she meets this very difficult funeral director, and then there is this random volunteer that comes in trying to do his religious obligation. So it's 3 people on the stage. Funeral is not moving forward until eventually she comes to terms with it and they have their funeral. The second one is about a boy who grew up in Australia, so he's Eurasian. His mother is Singaporean. The mother wants him to come back to Singapore to stay here for a while to get circumcised before he enlists into the army, because technically he has to serve his 2 years here. She does that without telling him that actually she has dementia. She tries to check herself into a home and everything, and she doesn't want her son to worry. The son, when he goes to Singapore, he's looking for his uncle, right? But then he finds out that his uncle actually transitioned and became a woman. Not just that, but the woman who is impersonating his mother because his grandmother cannot accept the fact that her son is trans. So there are a lot of dirty jokes. If not, the topic is a bit heavy, right? You kind of need a little bit of humor to balance it out. So that was quite a good job. I think that, you know, the issues that this playwright was trying to bring up are very unexpected. I felt that it was actually pretty courageous to write about these things, knowing that he could have gotten so much backlash from his community. Like, I would be afraid to write something like that if I had a wife and children, but he did it. So this is allyship, isn't it? Next book is also an AR from Nat Galley called And That Is Why Men Are Terrible. Honestly, right, when I saw the book title, I thought it was going to be a bunch of essays like non-fiction, but it wasn't. It was fiction. The closest comparison I can think about for this book is Otessa Moshfeg's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, because it's trying to satirize what it's like being a woman, trying to look for a job while also trying to date around. So to summarize, there is a woman, she's called Eve. She is underqualified, not say very educated, so she's unemployed. She wanted to leave a small town to live in New York City because it's so glamorous and whatnot. But then when she moves there, she realizes that it's very difficult to get housing and a job, so she's kind of like living off her friend's couch, but her friend's boyfriend wants to kick her out already because actually it's the friend's boyfriend's couch. So she ends up homeless and desperate. She takes a job for this very seedy character who's basically just trying to sell his sperm. And while she's doing this job, she accidentally makes a fool of herself in public by saying something that she shouldn't have, and then she becomes like an internet sensation, especially after people start throwing their coffees at her. They start videoing her and taking pictures, and she becomes a full-blown meme. Everybody is clowning her. She's getting doxxed, she's getting hate mail every single day, death threats, rape threats. The unrealistic thing I felt was that she wasn't very bothered by it. I think like when you read about these kind of things in real life, most of the time the victims of these kind of vicious online attacks really do take it quite hard, right? But she has this kind of like laissez-faire attitude. She's just like, oh, I'll just not look at my emails, or I'll just spend my 2 hours every morning just routinely deleting them in the hopes that one of these is a job offer. So it's a bit strange. Eventually she does land a sort of job. In that job, she also kind of like makes friends with somebody who ends up being quite a good friend to her. I really hope to see more of their friendship developing, but unfortunately that was not done. All people want to do is to sort of use her internet fame to promote their cause. Volunteer group, men's rights groups, they are just trying to get her to endorse and be the spokesperson of their cause. But she kind of has her honor and her dignity, so she just says no to all of them. She rather just not be famous on the internet at all. So I would say that there is no character development to Eve. From the start to the end, it's like she comes full circle. The book starts with a horrible first date, it ends with another horrible first date. It feels like, you know, when the character is disappointed, there isn't really much of a lesson in that, except to further prove the point that men really are terrible. We kind of got the message very early on, but the rest of the book just continues to try to prove it. To my surprise, this book was actually written by a man. I had to double check. I was like, who wrote this? Like I turned to the front and I was like, it's some guy called Christopher Mertic Lewis. Oh, and then apparently he's a family guy. He has like a daughter and a wife and everything. So I guess this was his way of trying to, I don't know, contribute to the feminist cause. Okay, finally, the last book that I read this month, also one of the best books that I've read this month, Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Lynn. I didn't realize it until I was done, but this author actually came from Malaysia. Yeah, she's living in Hong Kong now. So this book posits that Chang'e, you know, the traditional story of Chang'e. Chang'e has a daughter called Xingyin. This happens after she sort of drinks her husband's immortal elixir, and then she floats up to the moon to stay there forever and whatever. Xingyin is supposed to be a secret because Chang'e was being punished by the emperor and empress for taking what was not supposed to be hers, which was the elixir of immortality. So she was kind of raised secretly inside her mother's moon palace. She's very attached to her mother, which is not wrong, right? Because filial piety is a very big thing in Chinese legends anyway. One day, the emperor starts to sense that something is wrong, like, oh, there is like a different kind of aura over here. Is Chang'e trying to break the terms of our agreement? So she's getting very suspicious. So Chang'e tries to send Xingyin away. But then a lot of things happen, and then she ends up kind of homeless, trying her best to just find shelter, you know, to get a roof over her head. She ends up also being like kind of like a maid. She gets the attention of the crown prince. She becomes his companion after going through like a big exam, and then after that, while they grow up together, sort of like studying and learning how to fight, obviously they kind of fall for each other a little bit, right? I thought that was very nice. Like, it's kind of best friends to lovers kind of trope. She has a very good talent at archery because, I mean, look at her father. Who is her father, right? She joins the army where she kind of also draws the attention of her commander, which is like this high profile soldier that everybody is in love with as well. There are these like two hot guys kind of vying for her attention, but she's just like, no, I'm trying to save my mother. I like that. I thought that was good. She slays all kinds of monsters, nine-headed dragon, bone spirit, whatever. She just goes on all these very cool adventures and quests. Eventually, she manages to earn the talisman that is conferred only on very, very special people who manage to do a great service to the emperor or the empress. She does, but then she asks for her mother's freedom. But then the emperor and the empress are very like salty that she managed to sort of trick them into owing her something. And they were like, sorry, no, you cannot use this for somebody else, you must use it for yourself. And so she's like, okay, can I then use this to request a favor from you where you give me a chance to earn my mother's freedom back? And the king is just like, okay, you go and get the 4 pearls from the dragons. And she finds out that actually the king was just trying to use her to imprison and enslave the dragons to do his bidding. So at a huge personal cost to herself, she manages to free the dragons, but at the same time fulfill her task. And what that does was that it angers the king, so you know, he kind of tries to kill her and everything until enough people intervene, and then he cannot do it really, because then he's going to lose face in front of everybody. So she manages to save her mother and they are reunited, and then her boyfriend comes to visit her like every day. The thing is, right, you are reading an epic that's based on a legend. If you've read enough epics, if you've read enough legends, you will know that they will win. The hero will win. You know that Odysseus will go home. You know that Heracles will complete his 12 labors. You know that Psyche will manage to do whatever it is that Venus wants her to do. The point of reading this kind of book is not to see whether or not she will succeed, but it's to see how she succeeds and to see what else comes next. Like, you know, the tasks and the quests that are thrown at her, and you need to see how she handles it. That is the entertaining part of the book. And I thought that the author did a very good job of that. And also the author, right, did such a fantastic job describing the setting. It's like I could almost smell the flowers. I could literally envision what that guy looked like. I could, maybe not his face lah, you know, but I can envision literally what his hair looked like. I can envision the color of his robe. It's a very kind of opulent world building in this book. So I'm really excited for the second book. It's coming out, according to the author, October, November 2022. This year, that means she released, like, you know, both books within the same year itself. I would kill for an advanced reading copy. So yeah, I think this is a book that everyone should go and read. I found it more entertaining than the Legend of the Condor Hero series. I mean, that one is the blueprint lah, you know, but this is the new and improved version. So I think that is it. In June, I'm going to be overseas half the time. I feel like I won't have the time to read while I am there. I'm very excited to be traveling somewhere, even if it's, you know, it's not exactly for leisure, it's to visit family, but better than nothing, right? So if I have time, you know, while I am there, maybe I will do more booktube content. But looking at the itinerary, I highly doubt it. So I'll most likely just do the big wrap up at the end of June again before I have to go back into the furnace called employment. My holiday hasn't even started and I'm already just dreading the thought of it ending. You think that it's not normal, but like literally every working adult I know feels this way. When will it end? When you die. So I'll see you in my vlogs.